So a few more seconds before we start. For those joining us, just introduce yourself briefly and let us know where you're joining us from, what country, your name.
All right. Hi, hello, hello. Hafu, thank you so much for joining. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you all so much for joining today's session. My name is Chidi Colesworth, and I currently lead activities at Donors for Africa Foundation. First and most importantly, let me welcome each and every one of you and thank you all so much for not just showing up for today's session, but for also nominating a woman in development, for accepting the nominations when they came, right? For tuning into today's session. And I know that we have people from the first nominations to the second nominations to the third nominations. And I just want to say thank you all so much and welcome. First off, I would like to introduce Donors for Africa Foundation. So Donors for Africa Foundation is a non-profit located here in Lagos, Nigeria. But we have a lot of work that we do across the continent where we work with quite a lot of non-profits and funding agencies to drive development in the local communities. So our work is centered around managing donor-funded projects and also most importantly, helping non-profits and social impact organizations build their capacity, because we really believe that for any sort of change to be sustainable on the continent, then the people who are driving change must have the capacity to sustain change. We are working to reduce over dependencies on maybe government agencies or international funding agencies. We want our nonprofits to be around for a long time to continue to solve problems in their respective communities and of course, ultimately contribute to nation building. Just a bit of a background on the AWID awards that we've been involved in. So the African Women in Development Awards started off as what language would I use? It was really a personal research, right? So we were doing a lot of work at that time for some international agencies. And I was supposed to go on a search, on a quick research on African women who were leading change. Ladies and gentlemen, it will shock you to find out that there was no repository, there was no platform, none whatsoever, that had information about women who were contributing to the SDGs. I'm not saying that the women were not present. I'm just saying there was no platform, there was nothing, there was no list that was focused on women leading change in any aspect of the SDGs. And that was how it piqued our interest. And I said, so 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, if I don't do anything about this, someone would Google my name and probably just find that I just work for my nonprofit and who I am on a personal basis. So that was one of the key factors that drove us to go on a search for women who were leading change in their respective communities. But interestingly, it is beginning to evolve beyond even what we had anticipated. It's leading to so many more things that we would prefer to share as they unfold. But it is something that I'm extremely excited about, because now we can translate our change in our local communities to the world stage, to international communities. And allow me not to be too excited to share, because I have a tendency to, but I'm really excited. So today's conversation was also, it was drawn out of our findings as we kept on running these award programs. So the award is usually put together by a selection committee, and they go through the individual profiles of every woman who is being nominated. And we started talking or having a conversation about bias and about how many of us as women don't even, not just women now, but as development practitioners, because I know that this is such a diverse crowd, but as development leaders, many of us are not even aware of the biases that are holding us down, or the biases that we even have. You won't believe it. Some of the women who were nominated, they didn't even have a digital presence at all. Some of you would say, okay, some of them had digital presence, but what else could be a bias? Many of them did not even believe that they were worthy enough to share their stories. It was shocking for us to find out that some people thought, in fact, overconfidence, we saw that overconfidence was a bias, as crazy as it may seem. But what we decided to explore with today's conversation was to ask ourselves personal questions. As we keep pointing to institutions and international agencies and government agencies to break this bias, what bias are you holding on to that you need to break yourself? Either as it relates to your own personal 9 to 5, as it relates to your own social impact organization, as it relates to your own impression about the next woman who is leading change. What are some of the personal biases that you are holding on to? Some of us as development leaders, we feel like we need to keep getting certifications, educational accolades. We need to keep getting certain externals to validate or to oh my Lord, what would I say now? To validate whatever ideas or passion that we have. We keep expecting something on the outside to make us feel like we are enough. We keep expecting lists like this that we have put together even at DFA to feel that our work counts for something. So I'm one of those people who would say, in as much as there is a list, I also want third sector leaders to not think that the quality of the work that they do is being determined by how much they are recognized or not. So this conversation to me was personal as much as it was wholesome. And that was why we had reached out to the specific speakers and moderators who will be taking us for the rest of the session. And let me do a quick introduction, even just before we get into it. I want to quickly introduce our facilitators for today's event. Her name is Ebon. I don't want to go and call and bastardize her last name and her middle name, but her name is Ebon. Ebon is a Nigerian and a global citizen. She's an experienced educator, a mentor, and a business consultant with a love for development. Her passion is in promoting Africa's richness and development through education, business, and advocacy. She's also a certified humanitarian with extensive experience in international education, non-governmental organizations, finance, hospitality. She has carved her niche in the educational sector, where she designs curriculum, programs, business intervention, organizational processes, and she continues to be recognized for her performance for excellence. One thing I love about Ebo is her ability to birth new ideas. She doesn't just birth ideas, she also expands on these ideas. Ebo is someone that I've come to know to be a problem solver, someone who is quite ethical. She's bilingual. She speaks French, Italian, and of course, English language, and of course, her local dialect, Yoruba. And she's currently the head of academic strategy and delivery at the Nigerian University of Technology and Management. Ebu is going to be stewarding the rest of today's conversation. She's going to be forcing us to think. All I ask from everybody who is a part of this program is to not look at the person next to you, but question some of the bias that you think just may be hindering you. And as our speakers will share their stories, Dina and Hafu, these are women that have come to really love and appreciate their journey. I want you to also see bits and pieces of yourself in them as they evolved and went on to go from one point of their career to leading governments. You know, what can we glean from their stories? So thank you all so much once more for joining us, Ebu. I'm with my pen and paper and I'm handing over everybody to you. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chidi, for your kind introduction. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. We'll welcome you today, this afternoon, from all parts of the world. It's lovely to see you all join us from different parts of Nigeria and, of course, outside Nigeria. So quickly to get into the topic, and in line with celebrating International Women's Day, I'd like to also introduce our lovely speakers this afternoon, the lovely ladies here. And let me quickly start with introducing Dina. So Dina, her full name is Dina Hesham Khalil. She's got over 13 years experience in international cooperation and project management for developmental projects. She's got vast experience in health, NGOs, social protection, the financial services, and of course, the SMEs. She's a gender specialist, a PR specialist. She's worked in public administration, NGO, multinationals, and international organizations. She's also fluent in English, French, Arabic, and Spanish. She's currently the Government Affairs Manager. She was the former advisor to the Minister of Trade and Industry for International Cooperation. She's one of the 100 young leaders of the French African Foundation, a member of the National Council for Human Rights, a member of the Organizing Committee of the World Youth Forum, and a member of the Presidential Leadership Program. You're most welcome, Dina. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ebun, for the perfect introduction.
Great. So I'd like to also introduce our next speaker, just before we start with the opening statement. Hafutiore Sam is a Millennial Fellow at the Atlantic Council and the founder and chief executive officer of the HTS Partners, a financial advisory firm for small and medium enterprises based in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. At HTS Partners, Sam works on a multi-million-dollar fundraising transactions for clients across the African continent and focuses particularly on women-owned enterprises in efforts to reduce the financing gap for women. Sam provides financing for African companies and works with multilateral development banks, specifically with the African Development Bank and the International Finance Corporation. In recognition for her work, Sam has recently been selected as the young leader by the French African Foundation. In addition, she presents a series on national television called Parlons Business, in which she shares financial and managerial strategies for running a successful business. Sam also holds an MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and a Master of Public Administration from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. So while we have these experts on board, let's start immediately.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you so much for a
welcome.
great introduction. And in my current role, I'm the Deputy Director of Cabinet for the Ministry in charge of SMEs and artisans and transforming this informal sector. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Hafo. Have you all noticed that they're both in government? You see the power of women in politics? I don't want to use the word politics, but they are in government, which means we all have to be aware. So in navigating our unconscious bias, and I'm sure we all do have biases. I'm one person that has that for sure. Let's quickly start with the opening address from Dina first, your opening statement, and then we go on to Hafo, if that's okay by you. Over to you, Dina.
Thank you very much, Ebun, once again. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today celebrating International Women's Day and all the beautiful African women that are present today with us to discuss this very important topic, which is unconscious bias. And I would like first to thank Shidi and Donors for Africa Foundation for giving us this great opportunity to share our thoughts with everyone present. First of all, quickly, I just wanted to give a brief introduction about what do we mean by unconscious bias when we talk about it? It's simply the associations that we human beings hold outside of our conscious awareness and control. Unconscious bias is triggered by our brain automatically making quick judgments and assessments. So basically, I'm sure it has affected every one of us. And we are all, as you said, Ibn, have unconscious. We spread unconscious bias every time we communicate. This is, I'm not going to say normal, but this is how human beings actually function. And I think this is what has kept our species alive. Because the brain creates images of what's familiar. And I think the brain is less familiar or less of a fan of what's fundamentally different from what we expect. So, so it's not easy to actually change what triggers inside our brains. But what we can do is to consciously turn the unexpected into something to expected, so we can allow the societies to move forward. So how we do that, or how, out of my personal experience, what we can try to do, first of all, are mainly three things. Okay, so first of all, to visualize, for instance, what I used to do is to visualize the event or the meeting I'm looking into. To give you a quick story, I usually was the youngest woman around the negotiation table. So I started working in 2010. I was at the cabinet of the Ministry of International Cooperation, and I was actually often the youngest person in the room. So, so this was actually a very challenging situation to be the youngest member of the cabinet. But I have learned that I needed to take my seat at the table and to speak up and to speak louder. As a young woman working in the private sector and also used to work in the public sector, I must admit that I have been confronted by unconscious bias. And definitely, as I just said, we are all communicating unconscious bias every day. So basically, the three things is to visualize the meeting before walking into. So I tell myself, I know I'm the youngest person. I am a woman, especially in a society like Egypt, where it's very patriarchal. And told myself, I'll speak louder. And this, I'm not gonna say that it was easy. It took me a long time, trainings, confidence also, and resilience, persistence, and even tolerance with particular people, colleagues, partners, stakeholders, because I wanted them to be allies. I wanted especially men to become allies and to support me. So I decided to speak up, speak louder, and to silence all these little voices telling me that I'm not enough, that I'm too young. I had to silence these voices, and I said I'm not gonna be passive. I used to get comments like "You're too quiet," "You smile too much," "You're too loud." It depends on the context. So I said I'm not gonna let these little voices have power over me, and I'm not gonna let misplaced or even harmless comments intimidate me. So today in Egypt, women, actually, this is something I'm very proud to hold the top positions in every sector. In Egypt, we have the current government actually includes a historic number of 8 ministers, 8 female ministers, representing actually 20% of the Egyptian cabinet. Yes, exactly. So, and they are very powerful. I must admit that they're moving things forward very quickly. Even the COP27 that will be organized, it's hosted by Egypt, that will take place in November. In November 2022, is led by a female minister. The Ministry of Environment is a female minister. It's one of the 8. So, so this is actually what kept me moving forward. And I think one of the most important things is to challenge the bias. It's not an easy journey, but we have to outsmart it. So that's why I think by speaking up, it's the only way that we're going to move forward and achieve something. So I have a lot of things to say, but I think we can move to.
I can imagine.
Yes, so we can answer them. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dina. We heard that. So first is to visualize the meeting, visualize the event, decide to speak up and tell the little voices in your head. And we all have these little voices. I mean, I'm sure we all do. So shut them up and tell them, you know what, I'm enough, I'm better. So maybe daily affirmations can help as well. I don't know, but I'm sure we can navigate this together. Over to you, Hafu.
Hello again,
Hi
everyone.
again.
Gina
Hi.
said everything, so this was great. Just in terms of like how unconscious bias work, most time it's really about like when you're in a different space, when you're in spaces where you are with people that are usually different from you. So you usually have this feeling that, oh, let me at least, I assume that this one is like this because of this, and that. Let me get closer to this one because she's closer to me. And, you know, it's such small thing. That's why it's called unconscious bias. I'll give you guys a personal example. So when I started in my role in government, I had two assistants, one guy and one lady. So the thing is, I love pictures and I love being able to show like events of my day and everything. And I will always, let's call her Anna. I'll always go to Anna and say, oh, can you take a picture of me? Oh, can you film me walking into the office and so on? And whenever it was a guy, I would never ask him that. I would be like, oh, yeah, you make my copies, or like, you know, come in a meeting with me and so on. And it took like her going on, you know, holiday for a week that I realized that I had some bias where I felt like he will feel some type of way, although I was his boss, that he will feel some type of way about taking pictures of me. And until I was like, oh no, let me ask him just the same way I would ask Anna.
A female,
So then I started switching where I will ask him more to do these things because at the end of the day, they were both at the same level. So even me being a woman, being very pro woman and, you know, trying to give them equal amount of like, you know, meeting time and equal amount of work, by just feeling more comfortable around my female assistant, I'd created a bias where she was the one taking the pictures where he never had to do that, right? So it's those small things, even when you think you're working in impact, you think you're doing the best, and I'm always like, oh, women first, all of these things, let's do this, let's put the woman in front of the boss and all of this. I was still creating a bias with that small thing. And it was just because I felt more comfortable with that person. So some action plan, because I'm very action oriented. When we go into meetings, again, we tend to have biases about the people that are the most different from us, right? So when you're the youngest woman in the room, you think the old male is going to think that you're a secretary and so on. So affirm your position. It's not being bold. It's not, you know, some people think you're full of yourself and think, no, but you have to say these things when you come into a room. So you don't even have to deal with the assumption of being anyone's secretary. Oh, I'm here because I'm director of this, and this is the capacity I'm in this room. Second thing, go to, again, the person that you think is the farthest away from you. Because what you do by that, if I'm a woman and I go talk to another young African woman, obviously we're going to have a lot more comment. That conversation is going to go much smoother, right? But that white old man there probably hasn't met someone like me in this role. So having a conversation with him could break down most of his bias in that one single shot. Because the thing about bias, it's what we usually do in a quick instant, right? It's not a full thought out moment, or like racism or some of these other things that will happen. So when you go and have this conversation and you show that you're capable, intelligent, and you're here for the right reason, you're breaking down some of those unconscious bias. So I will say, get out of your comfort zone, go talk to the person that is furthest away from you in terms of familiarity. That's another thing that I try to do in most spaces that I'm not necessarily comfortable in. And then third, it's really about being result and action oriented. When you are in a certain position and being in, you know, a high level position in government, it's really important for me to identify, even in the way we assist our SMEs, because I work with SMEs and financing them, what are some biases that exist around youth, around women, around the most vulnerable? Because it's not just a matter of like race or female and male. There's also age issues. There's also issues with classism and many others. So there's always biases that infiltrate at all of these levels. So to be able to identify them for ourselves and for the work that we do, so that it's the most impactful for everyone. So that's really what I wanted to add. I'm in movement. I'm really sorry for background noise. This March has been so hectic, so do not mind me if you hear some background and so on, but I hope you were able to hear me.
Yes, thank you so much, Hafu. I mean, let me start with the one that hit me, where you talked about leaving your comfort zone to go to the last person in the room. I think that is really, really deep. Thank you for that tip. And then you also talked about being bold. So it's not arrogance, it's not a form of arrogance, but be bold, be confident when you get into a room. So where Dina says, visualize the room, also be bold, make your voice heard without shouting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this tips. So in quickly getting around this, I also wanted to ask further questions, if that's okay. So Dina, I know you have a lot to share. You said that. Would you mind sharing your journey in development, how it started, what led you to join the development movement, so to speak? You know, share your experience. How has it been and why, and how it started, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Yvonne, and thank you very much, Abu, for the great also introduction. I think we share a lot of common because since we work at the government level, so I can imagine what actually we as women have been through. When I started actually my career in 2010, I used to work in the development field from a government perspective. I was, as I mentioned earlier, was at the cabinet of the Ministry of International Cooperation. So we used to work a lot with different international organizations, donor agencies, and specifically I was in charge of the French portfolio, the Asian portfolio. So these two were the biggest portfolios. And as I said, it was very challenging to see what we as women can do. What I really like about women is I'm not going to be, this is also, I think, one of the unconscious bias, but I really believe in it, that we really make progress quickly. I mean, we can see it quickly. I think we're more of a, I'm not going to be biased, but task-oriented. When we really, I saw it, I witnessed it, we're very much task-oriented. So, and I think I'm not going to say diminish the role of man in the development field, but I think we make
A difference.
I think the results, yes, we're more result-oriented. So that's why I decided to take this step further, because I used to be sitting around the table and everyone was very sorry. Different and they used to tell me, no, Dina, we can keep you at the end because we need to finish and wrap up several stuff. And I used to come up with different solutions that were actually implemented or adopted at the end of the meeting. So that's where I realized that women can usually have a different perspective of how things can be changed. And then when I moved to the development sector from a private sector perspective, I saw the same thing. What usually were I'm not going to say this also, it's not very accurate, but we're bold in the way we approach things. I think, so this was mainly the thing that really inspired me to take this step further and focus on the development aspect. So I don't know if this answers your question. So, but basically this was it, and then I decided to take it further and go back to the government sector by also being in the private sector. So, as you mentioned earlier, I work in a multinational company. So we do a lot of projects. It's more of a health-related project, since it's a pharmaceutical company, but also being a member of the National Council for Human Rights. I have the opportunity actually to be open to different sectors where we can actually bring different solutions to different issues and topics. So being the member of the council, this was a turning point in my life, because it's one of the most prestigious non-profit organizations in Egypt. And because human rights is actually a topic that tackles a lot of almost all the sectors, I had the opportunity to actually improve the human rights sector by doing several campaigns, awareness campaigns, especially the social sector, since I'm in the social committee. So this was actually where I can bring my expertise from private sector and public sector. Combining both has been a major turning point in my career, because I've never been in the public sector and private sector at the same time. It has usually been or private or public. Being in having these two hats at the same time actually allowed me to do a lot of development issues at least for my country, definitely. So this is basically, I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thank you, Dina. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So thank you. So Hafu, you also have I'm assuming you have experience as an entrepreneur in the private sector and now in government. Did you do anything in particular to transition from these things you do or what you've occupied yourself with into where you are now, especially in development? How did you get into development? So what are the steps you took? Of course, briefly, but it will help people who are in the private sector or, or entrepreneurship in business. How did you transition? How has your journey been? How did it start? Hafu, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
No, so I was saying that coming from the private sector, I knew that I would always want to be in a role that is involved with, exactly started an advisory firm that worked with SMEs. I was super passionate about that. And I was working with the African Development Bank. So I had my plate quite full. But when the call came to me, and it really came to me because I went to meet with the minister to actually try to work with him and, advise some of the SMEs that were coming to the ministry. So trying to sign like a convention with them or like a memorandum. And he was like, oh no, I need an advisor and so on. I was like, oh, I have my plate quite full. But I remembered from, the Harvard Kennedy School, where I felt like it was time for me to start giving back to my country, that there were more ways that I could contribute to government. And it's so easy to stay on the outside and criticize when you can actually bring your competencies and try to help and change things. So I was like, okay, so let's start it on a part-time basis. I know that it's not always something that is available or that people are able to do. But for me, I had that because I had several projects that I needed to conclude that I couldn't just drop, right? And the minister I work with, also him being very understanding and agreeing to let me work part-time. For me, that was the best transition because I could see at the same time the difference is just even moving from my office to that office, the change in mindset, the change in culture, even in the way people work or interact with each other, everything was completely different, right? And for me, I'm someone who adapts to things super easy because I think it's so important to be able to adapt to one's environment and not make quick judgment. We're back to unconscious bias. I come into government with so many of them, they're incompetent, they're lazy because they get off at 3. Half of the policies don't make sense coming from the private sector. Sometimes you look at these things and you're like, what, who wrote this? But then when you get into the system, you're like, yeah, maybe she has to leave at 3 because she lives 2 hours away from the city and the salary is like literally minimum wage. So she cannot afford to be here until 5 because after dark, there's no public transport. So, asking simple questions like this, like how long it takes you to get you home? Because these were things that I was like, wait, people have 2 hours break? Like why? Like I was trying to understand some of these things that are like so foreign to us, especially coming from the US and then, being someone that is like high performing and wanting to get everything done in a day, where they're like, well, this process takes 3 months. And I'm like, what do you mean 3 months? Because, we will do this in 10 days at most. So really it was important for us to be able to understand why, break down those biases that we had and try to improve the processes where it needs to be improved. Not everything needs to be moved from a 3 months to 10 days. Maybe there's a reason because all of the other ministers need to look at it and it needs to make sense for everyone because everything that we do at the government, it really not just it's not just me, Hafu, that I'm putting in burden. It's my minister, it's the department, it's the president. So we have to look at all of these things. So it's much deeper than when I do something with my firm or even with the bank, where it only engages so many parties. There's so many stakeholders that are involved with everything that we do. And having that much of a reach and impact for me was so important in keeping me going and making me want to do this work and stay involved. So I think, the transition for me took the time that it needed to take while I was part-time. And then eventually, I moved into the role full-time and I took more and more responsibility. And I tell you, my team and I were like used to it. We're there until 10 p.m. when we have to get things done. But it took time for us to get there. But now we thankfully are. And if the advice to anyone, if you want to make obvious because you came from the private sector that you know everything, or we did it like this, so it's the best way. No, be open to learning, be adaptable, and just, work with passion, because at the end of the day, everything that you do has an impact on your country and on the people that you serve.
Correct. I totally agree. Work with passion, be open to learning, adapt quickly. Adaptability is a huge skill. So, Hafu, still on to you, please, if you don't mind. What were the personal biases you had, or what personal limitations did you have before transitioning? So you were coming in from the private sector, you wanted to go into government, fine, and you started part-time, then you evolved to full-time. Did you have some personal biases, apart from, being generally, a bit judgmental, like for civilians who think government workers are this way? What were your own personal biases or limitations, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, no, we all have so many personal biases. For me, and like my own that I came into with it was just like, would I be accepted in this environment? Again, not necessarily coming in a role that was quite senior, where I was woman, young, and, not having grown in the administration, because these are usually people that have worked with the department for a couple of years. So I had a lot of self-doubt about some of these things. And to compensate, and this is again biases. We think that, if I dress a certain way, they will take me more seriously. And this is really my own personal biases that are making me behave in a way where I'm assuming people's intent, right? And it's not just, my unconscious bias, because you have certain actions like where people come to you, they're like, oh, really? How old are you? Like bluntly. And so you're like, okay, well, let me, maybe dress up a bit like a grandma for certain meetings.
You look older.
See that it works. I promise you, it will work. Because they will be like, okay, well, she's a bit older and stuff like that. So the thing is, sometimes your unconscious bias will make you behave in a way that is sometimes needed or not needed. But after a while, I think it's all about accepting yourself and being like, okay, I'm here for a reason. Again, and I think I can add something to the table. So let me just contribute and do my best. And now breaking down those biases, it goes back to Gina's point and to the point I made earlier. If the assumption is that you're too young to do the role, deliver. You deliver, they'll forget about your age. Like literally, people that were like questioning me, now they're like, oh, hello, my boss. Like, and people are they follow protocol in administration. In our government, they're, they know you're their superior, so they will, usually try to defer to you until they feel like you're not worthy of it. So it's up to you to really prove yourself and make sure you deliver, and then you'll be fine. So some of these things that I used to do before, now I don't even bother myself with, and I don't try to pretend to do certain things because it will make me look more mature, or like, I'm like, I keep my personality as it is, and then still try to bring my full self to work.
Thank you, Hafu. Thank you so much. This has really been helpful. And then Dina, taking a point from what Hafu said, so if you're younger, for example, deliver, right? So with you being a female in a country like Egypt, what were the institutional biases they had? How did you cope as a woman, as a young woman? Because you were young, you were the youngest in the room all the time. How did you cope at that time? And how have you grown?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So as I said earlier, it's a journey. So you learn, as Hafu said, to deliver, actually to not remain silent. This is, I think, the key to success is to deliver, speak up. This is, I think, the most important thing, because as I said, I used to be very quiet because I used to enter the room and be the youngest woman in the room around the negotiation table. And I used to listen to these little voices outside and outside. So I used to look at them and feel intimidated by the people around the table, usually, especially in the ministries and the government. As Hafu said, usually most of them are men. So I felt intimidated, especially when you're the youngest, you're 20 something. Even right now, when I'm 30 something and I'm 35, and I think around the table I'm the youngest. The oldest might be 60 or 70, and even older. So usually I was looked at as the youngest person in the room who doesn't have enough experience or is intimidated by us, and this actually reflects something about the person itself. So I said that to make it to make myself heard, I have to deliver, as Hafu said. This is the key. I think to success is to deliver, is to say I'm here and I'm enough. And as you said earlier, Ibn, be bold. This is the most important thing. I remember like 2 weeks ago, we had a conference, and my boss, who was a former minister, female minister, in front of everyone, she said we will let Dina do the opening of the ceremony and be the moderator of the session. I'm actually the youngest person, and everyone was like, she's the youngest person. This actually, in terms of even of protocol, wasn't actually accepted. After I delivered, everyone, I think maybe the oldest person in the room was applauding, and he came to me and said, "Thank you very much. You wouldn't have done it. Actually, you would really." This is for me the best testimonial, because it comes from a person that I saw in his eyes that he wasn't actually not doubting my capabilities, but hesitating for the youngest member in the room to present a huge institution like the National Council for Women. So he came to me and said, "Congratulations, you did the best. We wouldn't have done it." He was speaking about himself. So I think, as Hafu said, to deliver, to speak up, to speak louder, and to make sure you're heard. This is one of the most important things. Being also an advisor, I have a conscious bias. I'm still fighting against it till now. It might sound very silly, but one of my conscious bias are tall people. Actually, I usually perceive and believe that tall people are perceived as more powerful and better used than a very short person. So in a country like mine, a young woman, short woman, and is usually when I enter the room, I'm like, everyone is looking at me. What is she doing here? I really, once I think I remember, I went to my boss and told him, I'm very short, I know, but I'm not 20 years old, I'm 35. And he was like, "You're 35, no, this is impossible." I said, "No, I'm 35, so I'm not a kid anymore, so please." No, but it was in a funny way. So one of the things also we can do is to, as I said earlier, when we visualize the event or the meeting we're walking into, what we can do is change the mental picture. So I know everyone is going to look at me as a young woman, but what I said to myself, I said, I'm going to be very open to different possibilities, and I'm going to examine the behaviors of the people that will be around the table, and I'm going to handle the situation. So as Hafu said, I'm not going to sit next to the person who looks like me. On the contrary, I'm going to explore the possibilities of talking and meeting new people and who are not actually like me. So this is, I think, also one of the ways to one of the solutions to change the unconscious bias is to examine the behaviors, to change it, and to talk about it. I think we need. That's why I said at the beginning. I think the most successful thing we can do as women is speak up. Speak up at, and when I speak up, not only in meetings, not only in a situation where we're not very comfortable, but to speak up in general about anything. I think in my current position as government affairs in AstraZeneca, I think I'm very happy to be part of the community. This is one of the most important things in the company. And even when because I recently joined AstraZeneca, so one of the most important thing here is to actually, when I first joined, is that they told us, if you find something, speak up, talk about it. There is also, different departments who do different cycle meetings to ensure and encourage not only women but also men to speak up. I think this is the only way we're going to change the behavior. And as Hafu said, it's very difficult to change unconscious behavior because it has been here for millions of years. I think when
and
we
it's
say
unconscious.
exactly,
It's not deliberate, it's unconscious, so it's more
exactly
difficult that way. Yeah.
thing about it, it's I'm trying to find the words in English. Incarné, it's something that is here that is triggered automatically. So to change something like this, we need to train the brain and to out. So I'm not going to talk only about men because we also have unconscious bias, as I said at the beginning. For me, sometimes it gets when we have meetings with the president, with anyone, but sometimes very high level meetings, I get sometimes very uncomfortable because I know I'm going to be the only person, the youngest person walking in the room, and I'm very short, so they're not even going to look at me as a woman, as an advisor, or as a government affairs manager. They usually look at the person and they forget the position, the title, they forget everything about you, and they look at the person just right in front of them. So sometimes I tell myself, it's okay, I have to be open, I have to understand. And as Hafu said, we have to deliver. That's the only way you can make an impact and make progress. When you deliver, they say, okay, we have to listen to this person. And I think that's the only way we can change unconscious bias by leading by example. Exactly. When they see that she looks young and she's actually the youngest person in the room, but she delivers. As I said, it was last time the person who was a former parliamentarian and a very old politician in Egypt came and congratulated me and said, very well done, we wouldn't have done it like you. I think this what makes it easier to change or to outsmart unconscious bias.
Thank you, Dina. Really helpful. Thank you. So, Hafu, would you say, you attended Wharton, University of Pennsylvania. You both have global experiences as well. But would you say the type of education you have has helped you in your career? What you studied, the type of schools you have attended, for example, and what you studied, has that helped you along the way?
No, so much. And I always say what Wharton gave me, sometimes when you look at the cost of an MBA, you're like 200,000, you're like, oh my God, that is so expensive. But what it's given me, I would never take that for granted, because in my bachelor was very technical. It was a bachelor in applied mathematics and finance and all of that. So I think that gave me the skill set to be able to do the job that I was doing. And I worked for a couple of years before going for my MBA. But what Wharton gave me, because, it's a professional MBA. So most of these people have worked for 5 up to 10 years. They're all in great position in their career, very confident, of a lot of also very wealthy people, very accomplished, right? And we're all in this place. And it gave me the confidence to be bold, to dream for things that are, this is the school of Elon Musk, who wanted to go to space. It just gives you room to be different, to try anything and not even be afraid of failure, because you're like, the worst that could happen is that I call the career center for them to find me another job. You know what I mean? So it really gives you that boost. You are here because, you are special. And that's why I always tell people that, want to in Harvard and all, and I'm like, no, don't think that it's because you went to Harvard that you're special. It's because you were special that they wanted you to be there, or not special in a way that you're different, but it's your potential that you put in these this application and all in these essays that they've seen, and this is why
they saw
here.
Something
and once you're there, and once you're there, they really make sure you understand that this life is for you to take. If you want to go and build a house in the sky, just, have a process, have a strategy. You can make it happen. And that beyond the technical skill set just allowed me to, for example, start this advisory firm from the US to advise SMEs in Cote d'Ivoire. Coming from a Francophone system, people would be like, oh yeah, go work for a firm for another 10 years, have all the experience you can account for. But I've seen people at work and pitch for millions of dollars that they got on a dream that like they slept on it. They're like, oh, I think this is a great idea. And they go pitch the next day and they raise millions, right? So this complex of like always being over prepared, having years of experience. I'm like, no, because my classmates will like wake up with an idea and go in front of investors and raise millions of dollars. So it just gave me this confidence, this access where in any room, you can put me with 4 presidents in the same room and I will feel like I belong. Like there's no room. I've been in places where I'm next to prime ministers that are just asking me how my day went. So I'm just like very comfortable in all of these spaces. And I think it's these soft things that I would take from it that I think are like, I couldn't put a price on it, beyond some of the great professors and great lessons. But I think that was one of the things. And same with Harvard, like it was really about how you can serve. Like, what are you going to use this talent or this passion that you have to do something great? And it's not about, they don't, you wouldn't have any professor invest in like your average dream. They're like, what more can you do? Like how fast, how big can you go? And that really helped with kind of crystallizing some of the things that I wanted to do. And now, I used to have like a 10-year plan where I'm like, okay, I'll get promoted in 2 years and 2 years. I'm like, no, like I want to just shatter. And if I want to start president and come back vice president, I can do that, So I definitely think that beyond some of the great skill set that we got from these schools, it's the access, it's the people around, it's the confidence and, the ability to dream beyond your wildest dream that I'm very grateful for. Yeah.
Thanks,
and I highly recommend.
Go ahead. You highly recommend what?
No, I say I would highly recommend for anyone that wants to go back to school, please do it. Because I finished my bachelor, went to work, and then came back to school. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. With the example you gave about you being comfortable in a meeting with 4 presidents, I don't take that lightly. I'm not sure all of us here will be that comfortable, but I wanted to reiterate, confidence, building your confidence is a journey. I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, Chidi, not everyone is born with confidence, right? Yeah, so it's important to let a lot of people know, especially women, that confidence is a journey. Building that confidence is a journey. With Dina, for example, who's in a society where men are stronger in court, it's important that you build the confidence, like she said, be audible, be there, show your presence, deliver, and be conscious about it. So don't limit yourself already. Don't defeat yourself. Let's all be conscious. So thank you, Hafu. Thank you, Hafu.
Yeah,
Chidi wants to say something.
Yes, Chidi, please
yes, can I quickly jump in here? Because she said something that I also don't want us to lose because of our conversations. She had also said sometimes we think we need to go through the steps because that seems to be like the generally acceptable way or standard of getting things done. So I need to start my nonprofit, then in 2 years I'll do this, then in 3 years I'll do this. That's a bias in its own. So you can actually just go from 0 and just shoot for it, as crazy as it may seem.
Exactly.
And don't feel like you need to go through. I mean, those processes are important, but don't have that closed mindset that you must go through all those steps before your work will count for something. So I thought to just reiterate on that, because I find it's very common with a lot of third sector leaders who feel like I need to work very hard, they will recognize me, they will offer me a role. No, you can be crazy and just go from 100.
Thank you, Chidi. That's really, really true. Thank you so much
totally
for bringing that up. Totally agree. So how do you know, Hafu and Dina, how do you know when it's time for you to shoot, for example? Let me start with Hafu. How did you know it was time? You started working. I don't know how many years you worked, but you started working. How did you know it was time to shoot? You talked about you feeling it within, that it was time for you to give back. But how did you know it was time to hit it, to hit the nail on the head, to go for that dream you had, to make the impact you had set out to do? So you had been thinking about it all this while. When did you realize it was time for you to say, you know what, I'm packing my bags and I'm going to impact?
Yeah. No, it was a very difficult decision, but I think, like you said, sometimes it's just time. I had been away from my country for over 10 years. I felt like, I had worked in all of the places that I wanted to work, from, a big four to the World Bank. And I had, gone to also the schools that I wanted to. So at some point I was like, okay, if it was a really tough decision, right? Because I was like, okay, I can graduate and then go work another 2 years, and those 2 years can turn into 4 and 5, or I can just immediately go back. And it's not always an easy decision because you have offers and also, a lot of people that are coming to you. And especially to go back and say you want to start your own firm, it's like, oh, what didn't work? Like, especially in our countries where entrepreneurship isn't always seen in the best light. But when I said that it was time for me, like everything that I was doing was preparing me for it. Like I would go to all the Africa conference. I'd already built a network. So the thing is also to be able to bringing it back to biases and its preparation, and it's really being able to plan things. It was time for me to go back, but I also felt like for this transition to be as smooth as possible, there's a couple of to have, still be in my environment. And that was what the African Development Bank did for me. I needed, for example, to make sure that, I kept a certain standard of living. So making sure I went back often to find a place. So there was a lot of things. And I had a family, my daughter, my husband. So all of these preparation helped make it the smoothest transition. And now when you come back, you can't have this like savior mentality, because I'm coming, I have the solution. No, there are people here that are already doing the work that you want to do. They're already contributing. Like having an open mind to like learning, to appreciating what is being done, and not coming in with like that's another bias, like a savior complex. Oh, I've done all these great studies, I know all these great things, I'm gonna come and save you guys. No, they don't need you. They didn't even call for you. You wanted to come. Like, who sent you? They will ask you. So it's really important to really smoothly integrate yourself in the ecosystem. Now, like when I was in a room, like I was in the hallway and people were talking about SME financing, and they started thinking of people, and then my name came up, and like that took years, right? Of like just slowly being in the ecosystem, contributing time, energy, money to these activities, so that eventually you feel like you're part of it and you're part of the solution, which is really what we were looking for initially.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you. And we're wrapping up slowly. So in one sentence, Dina, would you say, do you think women can break the bias? Do you think we're on that journey already? Do you think we women can break the bias? Do you think we're already on that journey?
Yes,
just
exactly.
briefly share.
I strongly believe that we can do it. We already, I think we're not only, I'm not going to only talk about, I'm not only going to talk about women, because we're not the only part in the ecosystem system. So we also have men, and I strongly believe that they're actually now standing up as allies to work for the upliftment of women. At least that's what I see in my country, which is exactly what we as women wished for years back. So definitely there is a lot of things that need to be done. But definitely I think that we're on the right track. But let's be also clear that we all know that that the route to breaking unconscious bias is going to be very difficult. And gender equality is still riddled with biases. But it's really, it's really up to all of us to break them. So not only women, definitely, but all of us together.
Thank you, Dina. And in one sentence, what would you recommend? What would you recommend to women,
for women
that are building their careers? Yes, women,
yes, exactly.
Outstanding women who are already building their careers. What recommendation? Just one.
To speak up and to deliver, and to speak louder.
Thank you.
Yes, to make their voices heard.
Thank you. And Haful, one recommendation?
To me, it's be bold. Like really be bold with how you are, with how you think, with who you are. Just we have to transcend, and we have to go really beyond what has been done to be able to help our ecosystem. We're in countries that are in tough time, where there's really hard problems, and it's now with like mixed solution that will resolve some of these issues. So really to be bold and, to come to the table with all of your arms, and that could be whether it's your education, whether it's your background, or your experience. Come and just be bold with the solutions that we bring to the table.
Thank you very much, ladies. So now we'll be addressing the nominees and award recipients. Chidi?
Oh, we interestingly did that already. So first off, let me say a big thank you to Dina and her food. Thank you so much for the conversations. These conversations always get me thinking, it get me started, because we always did that push. And I'm so glad you said a lot of very insightful things today. Many of us we should stop assuming we need to go through the entire process to get to our destination. Education is great. If you can pay for it, please go for it. At the same time, even if you can't pay for it right now, I still think you should also take some of the lessons that she had shared from her experience in school, which is just the ability to be bold and tenacious and not afraid of, taking decisions or moving forward. And for Dina, there are quite a lot of really young people as well that got into the nominations this year. I hope what Dina has shared in her story would also inspire you to realize that you may be young, it doesn't mean you're not fit enough to get the work done. I really think if we even look at the way things are going now, you will clearly see that the age is reducing by the day. So sometimes before you used to think you have to turn 30 or 35 before you make your first millions. People that are making their first $1 million at the age of 18, 19, 20, legit, not not wrong money, legit resources. So that just shows you that time has really changed. So I don't think we should keep playing the age card anymore. Oh, I'm too young for this, I shouldn't speak up, I should be hiding. I think that has really changed. And even for those people who even feel they are too old, because ageism is also another thing. There's some people who feel like, look, I'm too old for this, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be getting myself involved in this. Really, you should not deny people the opportunity to receive from your experiences, irrespective of how small you think they are or how big you think they are to fit in. So I just want to say a big thank you once more to Hafu and Dean. And I know that there's some questions already people have sent in. Hopefully they will be around to quickly take those questions in another 3 minutes, because I want us to be done at 3:15. And then to everybody who got accepted into the program, this is to just say thank you once more for the amazing work that you're doing in your respective sectors. I'm happy to hear from one person who is willing to share, to talk, to show up and just say something concerning their awards and concerning their journey and their expectations. If there's anyone, feel free to raise up your hands. I'm willing to throw the floor open to you. You just share with us some of your expectations or some of your thoughts on the awards and what your expectations may be, or just to have a general feedback on the session. Please feel free to let us know. But I just wanted to say, my coach would always say the reward for hard work is more work. It just shows that there is so much work to be done. Let's not rest. Let's rest. I mean, savor your winnings, but let's not now chill. One of my pastors will also say that the enemy of your current success is your last success. So whatever you achieved a few days ago is the enemy of what you're set to achieve in the next few days. So thank you all so much. And I want to say thank you for sharing your giftings with us and for giving us an opportunity to find you and to share your stories and to talk more about the work that you do. We're looking forward to knowing you better and just helping you be a part of the network, because it's going to evolve into think tanks and other things that we're so grateful for as our donors finalize this conversation. So I guess that's me saying thank you all so much once more for showing up. Ebu, I know that someone asked.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I sent it to you.
One question, yes. So the question here is, should women call out other women when you hear bias in their voices? So for example, if you're not working in an organization, there's an unconscious bias. Do you think we should call out those kind of people, whether men or women? What do you think? Dina?
Sorry, didn't hear you, Ibun. Can you repeat?
Do you think women should call out other women? So there's an unconscious bias that sometimes when we're at home, for example, if we're not working in an organization, there's a bias because we're not working in an organization. So should we call out those kind of people that are already biased towards those that don't work in organizations?
Yes, exactly. This is one point also I forgot to mention. Sometimes women themselves are the
Greatest critics.
exactly. So this is the point is that's what I said. We need to call out on unconscious bias, whether it's affecting us, whether it's in our workplace, in our personal life. I think it starts by this because, as I said earlier, it's a very difficult situation as unconscious bias are in I can't find the word in English, are very hard to change. So definitely when there is an occasion, when there's an opportunity to change it and to call it out, I think we have to. I think it's our role to do it. It's the only way and solution to make progress. If we really want to make progress in this aspect, we need to call it out once we see it. So yes, I truly believe.
I agree with Dina, and we could do it in a respectful, educated manner with exactly, but it needs to be called out because we have to remember that we're setting precedent by our actions, by the way we approach things and approach certain things. So if we don't call it out, then we're making it okay to do it to all of the women that will come after us. And the one that will even be called certain words like, oh, why are you whining and things like that, because nobody before said anything,
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Lumbi here has a question. Lumbi, can you unmute yourself? Go ahead with your question. You're muted.
Yes, sorry. Mine is not a question. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate this organization and how much I'm grateful for the opportunity to be featured as one of the women leaders in Africa, who are building in Africa and are growing in Africa. And I just want to say that, unconscious bias is something that is really hard to change. It's just that we keep hearing, but it's really up to us to see it when it happens and to actually be able to call out, biases when we see them happen.
Yeah.
It takes practice. We're gonna stumble and fail most of the time because we're not gonna see it, but sometimes we have to be really on the lookout and see see what's going on around us and be able to call it out right there and then. But more than anything, I just want to say how excited I am to be part of this journey and to be working with this organization. I think you guys are doing a great job and I'm just really, really excited. And I just want to say thank you.
Big congrats to you, Lumbi. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, but I have one more question. Sorry to interrupt you. I have one more question for Hafu. And Hafu, I'm asking you particularly because I know you do a lot of work around funding. Hafu, do you think you've observed a difference between the way women attempt to raise funds and the way men approach funding or stakeholders? Because our work a lot of times involve a lot of asking for money. So do you think you've noticed any bias?
Oh, no. Even I have so many bias. Like I've had men call me and they're like, oh, you lowball this. Why are you asking for like 2 million? You should be asking for 10. Even when I ask for 2, I will go back in the Excel and make sure almost if I feel like it's too much, I will want to reduce it to the minimum. What is the minimum amount I could ask? And that is a total bias because I will feel like, oh, I'm not asking for too much. And knowing that I've had people that, probably had a budget of 1 million, but asked for 10 just in case, and they still got it, right? But I feel like I need to justify every comma up to the cent. So I don't know if this is like a woman versus personality also, but I think it's so important sometimes to, look at our peers. Let's learn from some of these men, again, being very bold and asking for some of these amounts. And fundraising is a skill set that I recommend every woman to learn. You want to launch a business, you will need to fundraise. You want to, even for events, I fundraise with my foundation. You need to fundraise for almost everything that you want to go for. Budget in government, you need to be able to define your line and be able to defend it in front of a whole set of people to say why you deserve to have this money versus something else. And sometimes it's really like, oh, we need to be building more school. Why should we be giving it to you? We need to be building more hospital. So you need to be able to make those arguments, and it's only that practice makes it better, like perfect, you know. So learn it and always question yourself, like, you know, if I was across from the table, what would matter to me? And not, you know, think that, oh, okay, I'm asking for too much. And this is something that I still do 10 years later, you know. So it's not easy, but I would recommend doing it. So sorry,
Thank you
ladies, I
very
really
much,
have
ladies.
to run.
Thank you very much. It's fine. Thank you very much, Dina and Hafu, for your insightful time and tips. There are a lot of strategies we've learned. Thank you very much, everyone, for being part of this program. Thank you so much. I'm sure Chidi, Donors for Africa, will send you further information. But as we wrap up, we just want to say thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Ciao. Bye.